Good morning, everyone. Whoa, what a thrill to be here. An amazing day and a wonderfully organized conversations so far. And weren't we inspired by our student panel before? Yes, indeed. How often do you get to hear, well, participating in this helped me figure out who I want to be, what I want to do with my life? How often do you get to hear, this opportunity gave me an explosion of possibilities. Very cool, huh? So these expressions of the power of being engaged in a discovery process just really piques our interest on how in the world does that happen? How does it happen? How does it happen in classrooms in particular? How does it happen also out of classrooms? Well, our intrepid panel is going to tell us some of their secrets about how they imagine and enact creativity in their classrooms. So, if you could introduce yourselves, panel.
Oh, there's also that hand on there.
And
is this okay?
I think that's okay. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Hi, I'm Pat Steenland. I'm a lecturer in the college writing programs. My participation in the Discovery Initiative is that I'm a member of the First Step Discovery Project, which is looking to transform beginning requirements at Berkeley into discovery seminars.
Here's one there. You can use that one.
Hi, I'm Susan Moffat, and for 10 years from 2013 to 2023, I was Executive Director of the Global Urban Humanities Initiative and Future Histories Lab. And these were Mellon-funded projects that were joint ventures of the College of Environmental Design and the Arts and Humanities Division, bringing together methods from all of those disciplines to look at cities and urban life through interdisciplinary, project-based, collaborative, usually team-taught courses. And over that time, we created more than 40 of these courses, and we also created a kind of cross-curricular program called A Year on Angel Island that we are going to show at lunchtime a little film about. And I'm going to talk just about one class in particular, but later I'd be happy to talk about the program as a whole and kind of the larger curricular issues in addition to kind of the nuts and bolts of putting together a project-based class.
Hi everyone, excited to be here. My name is Kosa Goucher-Lambert. I'm an assistant professor in mechanical engineering and also a part of the Jacobs Institute of Design Innovation, which is a cross-disciplinary institute that represents design and making. Today I'm primarily going to talk about a summer research experience that I started called the Engineering Design Scholars to kind of transition students who are interested in cross-disciplinary design from going through these initial experiences into faculty research experiences.
Hi, I'm Eugene Chiang, a faculty member in the Department of Astronomy, also cross-listed in Earth and Planetary Science. Currently serving as head undergraduate advisor for our astronomy majors and also PI for the Discover grant to physics and astronomy.
Thank you, panelists. So the way this session will work is I'm going to lead off with some questions for our panelists, and then we'll have a discussion with you. So get your questions ready to ask.
We're doing a 5-minute presentation for each of the panelists.
Yes, that as well. That as well. Coming right up. Actually,
Let's start with that.
the first person to lead off on that 5-minute presentation is Pat Steenland from the college writing programs.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a formal presentation. It's actually in response to a question that Glynda shared. What does teaching toward discovery look like? So we have 5 minutes, not a lot of time. And I would just like to quickly lay out some ideas with the understanding it's a work in progress. This is also a collaborative project with faculty, some of whom are in the room. Our project asks whether we can take beginning requirements, R and C sequence, 1A, 1B, beginning foreign language. They're required for all students. If we're looking to reach students, there they are, from all different walks of life. Can we transform them into a discovery experience? We've been working on this for 3 years with, I think, just really incredible results due to some of the faculty in the room, and I hope you hear about those projects. But one of the things that I'd like to address is we're doing this work, but the university still has its traditional structure, which is a disciplinary structure and a hierarchical structure. And we've run into the notion, it's like, can students really create knowledge in a beginning class? They don't know enough. They need to learn so much first. Well, that's the tension that I'd like to address. And so that we don't have this sense that we're introducing something, you know, just helter-skelter, and students aren't going to learn what they need to learn. And I was thinking an analogy that might work is if we think of something like theater and beginning theater. It's like, how are we going to introduce students to theater? We say, well, you know, students cannot produce a full-fledged Broadway production and with all of the sets and all of that and all of that. So let's have them study vocal exercises for 2 years and scripts and do all that work for 2 years. And then afterwards, maybe they will step on stage. And we know what would happen, right? We would lose a lot of people. We give beginning students theater, and we see the magic, what happens when students engage in theater. And our premise is that at the university, what happens, the general shared thing, is genuine inquiry, whether it's in the arts, or in the sciences, or in the humanities. Can beginning students engage in real inquiry and contribute to knowledge? And I think you heard from the panel, yes, they can. So what is it that the teacher does? The teacher in the beginning classroom is like that beginning theater teacher. You don't give them Lear, you don't give them something that is like, but you can give them something else and they can transform it themselves. You heard from the students the necessity of trust, of belief, this shared experience. So I can talk more about it. We can also learn from people in the room. It's very different in different teachers' classrooms, but there are some structural things that we have come across that we have worked with. You begin with a point of shared inquiry. It has to be, you are choosing a subject that will engage students, but also where there is really room to question. Whose story is not represented here, or what might be explored? It is shared inquiry for the teacher and the student alike. And the class becomes a collective engagement in that inquiry. And one of the, I'll move the mic, but one of the things I'd like to say, I think we're just missing such incredible opportunity. I don't know if you guys had the experience, but listening to the students, I was just thinking, what would that be like multiplied across our student body? I mean, it would be phenomenal, right? At Berkeley, we have a unique opportunity. Our student body is so astonishing. A top-tier university with this diverse student body, and they're in the room. And in these beginning requirements, they're in a small room, so they can talk to each other and learn from each other. The other thing I would like to suggest is that this kind of teaching, especially beginning requirements, often happens with lecturers. And again, the structure of the university is hierarchical. The rewards for faculty are individual and hierarchical. You go up through the ladder rank, and usually there's only room for one person on a ladder, you know what I mean, when you're going up? We have found that if you have a lateral creative space for faculty to work together, to work on these ideas, to put them into practice, the results are incredible. It's not mentorship, it's not sharing of resources. I like to think of it as like, this is like the writer's room when Hollywood is coming up with a new idea or something like that. You put the writers in the room, and I would like to suggest that the university needs to really look at that and support that. We've had some phenomenal projects come out, but faculty are asking, what is next? Okay?
Thanks, Pat. I'm loving this notion of genuine inquiry and the idea that all our students can engage in genuine inquiry. Even beginning students, we can find ways to bring them into notions of knowledge generation. That's a very cool thing. I hope we get to talk more about that. So, Susan, if you could introduce us.
Yeah.
Yes.
You want to come up?
Yeah, because then I can see what you're seeing better, and I can just forward this on. So many great issues raised by Pat, and I would just add to that in the disciplines that my program was working in, design, architecture, arts, and humanities, we were able to provide these kinds of opportunities for everything from doctoral students, which is what we started with, to incoming freshmen in the summer bridge program in the summer before their first fall. So I think that there are ways of doing this. It's going to be different by discipline. So this was a project to tell local history. So it was a public history project in which we were sharing local histories through the landscape and through arts by creating a walking tour that was a downloadable audio tour with an augmented reality aspect and also installations in public space using the landscape as a means of storytelling and as an observatory from which to think about California histories of extraction and flows of capital and labor. And so we used as our laboratory, and I would also say this took place in spring 2021, so in the depths of the pandemic, which impacted a lot of what we did. Some of you may know the Albany bulb. It's a landfill that sticks out into San Francisco Bay that, because it was never capped, has been used by artists to create guerrilla art for a long time. It was also home for a number of years to a community of unhoused people. This was the place that we were using as our laboratory, as our theater. This was decided at the beginning of the class. This was going to be our object and our place of study. We set the themes and the formats of the outputs at the beginning of the semester. We knew we were going to make a website, and this is one part of the homepage of the website, linking you to stories about dynamite manufacturing, Chinese immigrant labor, redlining, wartime housing segregation and desegregation, the oil industry, and so on. These were all things you could see from this spot. And so the format of a website, an audio tour, augmented reality, and making installations in place, those were set in advance. We didn't know exactly what they were going to what we look like in the end. What we ended up doing was to install 8 installations over a 1-mile tour that was open to the public, and we were aiming at a kind of performance. At the end, we had 3 invited audiences who downloaded and took our audio augmented reality tour, but this was permanently available to the public. So, I think our fantastic student panelists identified some values, that they got out of their discovery projects. So, public facingness raises the stakes. It makes you want to do a better job, and you realize that your work is consequential. So I think that's important. Cooper was talking about community and collaboration. This was a group project. Like putting on a play, we were all working together in small groups to create a single output at the end that had to be integrated. And it was fieldwork based, which kind of plays off of what our third student speaker was talking about going out in the field, dealing with real people, again, having things be consequential. And as Evelyn said, the responses of the public are what tell you what the value is of what you've created. So when the students at the end learned that people kept telling them, I didn't know this about this place, I didn't know this history of California, they knew that they had created knowledge and that they had shared it effectively with the public. So the experience of the visitor when you took this tour was to, as you can see, this person is listening to the audio tour that takes you from place to place. You're directed to either a bench or a sculpture or something that directs your attention to the Golden Gate. Think about the Chinese immigrants coming through. Off to your left, you're asked to look at that hillside where the racetrack is. That is where the dynamite factories are. That is where the immigrant laborers were treated as less than human and were really put in very dangerous situations. The names painted on the bench are the individual workers who had names and lives and families, and this particular student really wanted to make sure that those people remembered, even though they had perished in their labor. And then down below you can see one person bending over to look at the mosaic that the students had installed at each spot, which triggered an augmented reality slideshow to give you pictures of the historic pictures of what had been there before. Students did other projects, like one of the stations portrayed the container shipping in Oakland that had transformed the economy in so many ways, and you're looking past this painting to the actual location. You can see the gantries in the distance there. Here is an example of one of the mosaics that triggered the augmented reality slideshow, and you can see that incidental visitors to this park could come upon this, and actually this was before we installed a QR code, but it tells you this is station 3 of number 8, and if you just happened upon it, there would be a way to interact with this. So the key characteristics of this class, and we can talk about what the challenges are of these characteristics later. It was public facing. It was a collaborative group project where everybody had to be moving toward a shared goal. It was more like a theater performance than a collection of research papers, although there were individual research papers that the students produced and that are visible now on the website. The community was engaged as audiences and beta testers, and that interaction was essential both in the iterative creation process and in the long-term impact of the project. And the formats, the containers of the knowledge were established in advance. And I think just in terms of advice, the more complex the project, the more you're asking students to do, the clearer the guardrails have to be, the clearer the more decisions have to be made in advance. So if you're doing a kind of group project, being clear on what decisions you want students to make and what decisions are made in advance is really important. And so these will be shared later, but just some resources about our projects. Thanks.
Thank you. And next we will hear from Kosa.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're also going to go
Yeah, perfect.
unhinged from the table. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kosa Goucher-Lambert, again, from Mechanical Engineering and the Jacobs Institute. So first I thought it'd be good to just briefly orient people to what is the Jacobs Institute for Design Innovation. So it's a building on the far northeast corner of campus, and we're thinking of it as an interdisciplinary hub for learning and making at the intersection of design and technology. And we want students here to encounter, explore, and excel in designing emergent technologies that benefit people and the planet, right? So it's a mouthful. But what this really means is a variety of experiences that students can have kind of at different levels of expertise. So we operate a large makerspace where students can interact with different technologies, they can take classes, they can attend workshops. And when we start to imagine this, if you look at the bottom, there's kind of these 3 different levels of progression that we can imagine students in our ecosystem progressing through. So at the beginning, you'll note we've turned this discovery through design. So this is like that first foundational level. They're discovering design. They might come, they might do a workshop, they might take an introductory class on human-centered design. But we wanted to think about how can we get students to go beyond just that first discovery and really go to the end, which we view as advancement of design, being involved in expanding what is known and what is possible, and potentially that could be through the engagement with academic research. There's also an intersecting issue here is like, who thinks that there's a gap, I think, for a lot of students. They might not believe that the research is a good path for them, and depending on the student, there might be a barrier there. And so about 5 years ago, I developed this program. The name of the program is the Berkeley Engineering Design Scholars. It's a summer research experience. So here's a few quick facts. So it's 10 weeks in the summer. This is only open right now for Berkeley students across majors. Each of these students is then paired with a faculty member that's a part of the Jacobs Institute network. So some of the areas that we represent will be engineering design, human-computer interaction, data-driven design. So students receive a stipend in the summer, and there's also some additional programming like workshops and seminars and social events that they participate in. So one of the main tenets of this program is really to give students that might not otherwise have access or exposure to a summer research experience that opportunity. And so just to give you a sense of like who's involved, so at the top right, there's 4 faculty members, there's others that have hosted students for a position in their lab, and there's also a huge lift on the staff side as well. So programmatically as well as operating our makerspace and doing some of the workshops. And so after, over the last 4 years, we've hosted, and I'll show on the next slide some summary statistics, about 30 different students. And you can see just very quickly a sampling of kind of what they're working on and a variety of faculty that they might have been paired with for that summer experience. So yeah, I'm really proud of both who we've been able to kind of find through this program, and I'm excited to also talk about some of the challenges and I think opportunities with running a program like this. So in summary, we've had 4 cohorts do this summer experience. We've funded about 30 people, and I think we have a nice mix of representation across different kind of measures that we might think of related to diversity. And in particular, I was really happy in the number of both first-generation college students as well as transfer students that we've been able to find through this program. So that was really brief, and I was told just to keep it super short. But again, I'm really excited to explain more about what we're doing and answer some questions. And also in the slides, I have a link to the application. We're running this program again. So if you know a student, they don't need to be an engineering student. It can be a student from any discipline related to design on campus if they want to participate. And we'll also have some info sessions about this experience where they can learn more if they're just curious. So that's linked in the slides. And there's a website where you can also browse all 30 of those past projects. So there's some really incredible stuff that students have been up to. All right, thank you.
Thank you, President. He makes me want to say, sign me up. So we'll hear last about what discovery looks like in astronomy from Eugene Chiang.
Thanks, Evelyn.
Does that work?
I think it'll take some time to.
Or we're having the same issue. Oh, there we go. Great, yay.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much for inviting me to participate. So yeah, we competed for and were awarded a 3-year grant from Peter Turnin and his family to improve undergraduate education for several hundred physics and astrophysics majors. We spent the money on a lot of different things, some of which worked, some of which didn't. Happy to talk about all of it. I think it's important to talk about all of it. In the time allotted, I'll just go over a few things that worked. If I can advance.
Oh, is it on the wrong?
Great, thanks very much. We spent a lot of time improving advising, coordinating advising. And what I mean by coordinating is not just having staff bear the burden of advising hundreds of majors, but also spreading that service to faculty and also to students themselves, so peer advising. I know that many units on campus are already doing this, but for us, this was a real revelation that it could work so well.
we are together in the same room with these students who come asking for help, to direct their lives or give them advice about whatever it is that they're interested in. Sometimes that's a physical room, sometimes it's a virtual room. And do you know what that icon represents? It's the icon for
Twitch?
Discord.
Discord, exactly.
the other
Discord.
one.
It's for Discord.
I showed my age.
It's for Discord, which is I like to call it Slack for cool people. Sometimes it's a virtual room, and the questions come from all over, right? I mean, hundreds of students who are logged in, and they ask tons of questions. And actually, over the years, we found out they're all the same questions over and over again, right? Like, what classes should I take, or in what order, or how do I get involved in research, or what can I do with my degree? And we just go to town with these questions. I participate in answering them. I give a thumbs up to the peer advisors who give answers. And it's not just us, right, who are advising. It's the entire community getting in there and just sharing their experiences. So this really works. And I should say, the answers that we give, right, between staff and faculty and students, they're all very complementary. In many cases, the students give answers. I always let the students go first. We're literally in the same room, right? If it wasn't for today's event, I'd be in my weekly advising office hour, and Sophie and Sunny would be in the room, and I always let them go first. And they give answers. After they give their answers, I think, wow, they gave answers that are so much better than the ones that I was about to give. And I just literally, give a physical thumbs up. So it just really works. Yeah. And I should also tell you just what a pleasure and how fruitful it has been for us, staff members like Brianna Franklin, faculty, fellow faculty like Austin Hedeman, and students, for us to actually talk to each other. So what I've learned from this project is do not underestimate the power of just like talking to other people, in particular across departments, and also between different service roles. Okay, so an idea will come up in physics, and then astronomy will think, oh, we should try that too, and vice versa. It's been very fruitful to talk for our two departments to talk to each other. Okay. Good, thanks. So another thing that worked was teaching. So we have a whole tutor system set up now. These, in year 3, it runs like a machine. We have a number, it has lots of parts. So we, the faculty and the staff, we select tutors, okay, based on transcript, based on statements of purpose, and we select something on the order of 18 students and we deploy them across the entire curriculum. So lower division, upper division, both in astronomy and in physics. These tutors, every week, they go to the Student Learning Center where they attend a pedagogy seminar where these fine individuals that, whose pictures are there, they teach teaching best practices. And the fellow up on the upper right foots the bill. So Steve pays for the whole thing. These tutors, I would say in several of them, you could make the case that they are better than GSIs. You know why? Because they actually took the course that they're tutoring in. So quite often, especially in the labs, they will show the GSIs around, like, well, this is how this machine works, and this is how it breaks, and this is how you fix it. So it really works. And it's win-win for everybody. There's the saying goes, right, is that the best way to learn a subject is to teach it, and they're putting that into practice. Here's my last slide.
I myself have found an incredible number of applications just playing around.
So yeah, it's okay.
Boards. They run from building with my...
Yeah, so I apologize for that. The audio is a little screwed up. But this slide is all about what I would say is one of the highest forms of discovery, which is research. We fund a number of research programs, quite similar, I would say, to the one that Kosa talked about. So in physics and in astronomy, research is hard, right? It's the unknown. We don't know. If we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research, I think is what Einstein said. And it takes time, it takes organization, effort. There's really not, it's not turnkey at all.
it takes supervision in particular. And all the things that are on the left are, I would say, senior PI supervised, right? Mostly faculty and postdocs getting involved. Because of this grant, we've been able to pretty much meet demand. We're pretty much there. For the semester stipends, we're pretty much there. Although I will say next year, Discover funding runs out, and so the oversubscription rate will be 2 to 1. Just to tell you that. There are research-like experiences, right? So sort of analogous experiences, not quite on the cutting edge, but like things break and you have to fix it. These are courses, I would say, that are a closer approximation to real life than your standard lecture-based course. So these are the labs, right? These are the labs. And the picture there is of my colleague Aaron Parson. Kosa will know what this is. It's Raspberry Pi. Okay, it's a little chip that you buy, off a, it's not terribly expensive, maybe $20 or $30. And you program it yourself, right? It is a computer that you're holding in your hand. And what Aaron is asking his students to do in the radio lab is to program it and create an entire measuring tool to go off and measure the spiral arms in our galaxy. So he literally gives them a shoebox, having one of these Raspberry Pis, a multimeter, and some duct tape, and he says, go. So there's a little bit more to it, but it's very much this sort of hands-on, just, you will build the things. This is not cookie cutter, and we're asking you to, I guess, be.
Thanks so much, Eugene. It's really cool to hear. It's really cool to hear about what works, and also to begin our discussion about some of the challenges around discovery, like sustainability. How do you keep it going as well? So I'm going to ask just a few questions to our panel before we open things up for discussion. And the first one has to do with creativity, either big C or little c. Evelyn mentioned before her definition of creativity, and creativity and the student as creator is one of the themes of our gathering today. And Evelyn mentioned that she thought about creativity as imagination and action, and she also connected it to student agency, believing in an embodied way that you can make a difference and you can control, have an influence on your future and solving problems in the world. So I'm hoping that some of our panelists would be willing to think about with us how the lens of student as creator has informed their notions of teaching toward discovery. Yeah. Pat, you
Start off?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you could lead us off, that'd be great.
Yeah, I loved Evelyn's framing of it, and so let's the sense of agency, hugely important. What does it mean for a student to be a creator? And we've heard from these incredible projects. What I'd like to throw out there in a beginning R&C class, when you are a creator, you have something you want to say, right? When students are farther along in their majors, or they have perhaps something they want to say, what do we do at the very beginning? And I think it's hugely important to have that kind of experience for students at the very beginning. But how is it that we do it? I think what we do by the teacher also engages in a creative act. It is a creative process. You are imagining the classroom. You are observing who's in the room. You are thinking about what is going to engage them. And you are looking for something to awaken their curiosity, where they can connect. So I think there's a lot of emphasis now on students and their passions. I think actually it kind of puts a lot of pressure on young people. It's like, do you have a passion? Well, some people do, maybe some people don't. But for the teacher to think of themselves as the person to awaken the curiosity, and a curiosity is, to me, one of those incredible things where, like memory or other kinds of things, you don't choose it. You cannot make yourself be curious about something. Just try it. I think people have tried it, right? It's like, it doesn't really work. But you, in an engaged classroom, in a collective endeavor, and we've heard from the students that you had the feeling that a teacher trusted you to engage in the real thing, and that you had something to say, and that it mattered. When did the training wheels come off? And what that felt like. And for us to try to structure that experience for our beginning students, then the student does become a creator. They're engaged, they discover something that they want to say, they have a feeling that it matters. You hear about how it travels outside the classroom. But that building of the classroom is really a very different kind of classroom than the conventional one that we assume about beginning skills and things like that. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. And you've awakened in me the notion that this discovery process is not only for students, it's also for teachers. And there are ways in which we can become more creative in our teaching through engaging with our students in the discovery process. So thank you for that. Rest of the panel, do you want to add anything to thinking about creativity, or how maybe you've had to stretch a little bit in order to center students as creators in your work?
I'd like just to speak to collaborative creativity and working together, which is one of the most important things that we worked on through our 10 years of experiments, where students were asked to co-create with each other and also co-create with communities. And I think one thing we really learned was that we need to teach that, we need to learn that, and it needs to be, time needs to be given to that, of how to work together. You can't just say, go work in a group. I'll just give an example of a mistake that I made, which was in one case, students were asked to work in pairs to do research and then write the website article that would become the basis of their audio portion of the walking tour. And of course, students have different interests, they have different working styles, they have different paces of working. So in one case, one student was great at doing the archival research. She dug up, old newspapers, but she had a lot of challenges with writing. And her partner was a very gifted and fast writer. And in all of our courses in Future History, Latin, Global, and Humanities, we both encourage students to play to their strengths. So if you have a team with 10 people with 10 different strengths, play to your strengths, go with what you enjoy. Also, we wanted to provide a safe environment for people to stretch, get out of their comfort zones, and try something new. The student who was a slower writer, the other student just wrote the whole thing very quickly, and she didn't have a chance to participate and fully do what she wanted to do. And so that is something that I should have addressed beforehand, to talk through with students. How do you let each other play to your strengths but also support each other and giving each other time? What do you do if the pace is different and it's due tomorrow and one student has an accommodation and the other doesn't? So these are things that, next time I would really think through and be very explicit about in advance. That's just one example of how supporting creativity and working in groups needs to be, it needs time and attention as a thing in itself.
I just wanted to add one thing, and one kind of anecdote. So in the classes I spoke to and the experiences I spoke to, they, in a way, are inherently creative activities, right? Most people would say design is a creative activity, and so I started asking students, they feel like they're doing something creative, but then when I ask them, do you yourself think that you're creative? Then the answer is oftentimes no. And so then it became this exercise of communicating, and I think Evelyn spoke to this earlier, the different levels of creativity, and showing them that doing and participating is a creative act in itself, and starting to give students more confidence in the fact that they are creative. And it's not just students, I think faculty too. So, just knowing that, a lot of times if you're doing something creative, you don't apply that same mindset of, oh, I'm also creative myself. I'm not just doing something creative.
So Glynda's phrase is student as creator, and I would say the student as creator has a major advantage, which is that they're free thinking. Buckminster Fuller put it this way: dare to be naive. And they don't see necessarily the limitations that are in the way. Many times in class, for an intro class, they will ask a question, right? A simple question, turns out to be the most deep and most difficult to answer. So they sort of home in right on the heart of it, automatically, because they're coming at it, right, from a fresh perspective. So I really value that. That is a major advantage in working with student researchers. I want to second what Susan said about collaboration. Many students will ask themselves, when they're working on something, what does it matter? Like, I'm doing this, like, what does it matter? Well, if they're working on with a team, or if they can see how it connects to other people or communities, that's their answer, right? I mean, that's the motivation, because other people care about what you're doing. They're listening. So that's really important. And working one-on-one, you can sort of lose that. It can be hard to maintain that. So that's where teams can be super important. I did want to emphasize just that, to do these things, you do need to have a base, a foundation. And that's where I spend so much of my time.
Thanks, Eugene. We're getting a sense of how teaching needs to change in order to support discovery. And that's a very interesting thing to think of as a kind of parallel kind of outcome from a discovery project. And that is, how do you develop the habits of mind and practices as a teacher to support discovery in micro moments, as well as in the larger design of a discovery project? I think we've heard some examples from our panelists. Well, I want to ask just a couple more questions, and then we'll open things up for a discussion. We've already begun to talk a little bit about the challenges that accompany shifts in teaching, shifts and changes about conceptions of students and what students are capable of. I wonder if we could talk just a little bit more about that explicitly. That is, what are some of the challenges and tensions you might want to mention that you've experienced as you've engaged in this process of teaching toward discovery?
I guess I have the mic, so I'll start. One big issue that I've personally faced is a measurement issue. What's the impact, and how do I measure that appropriately? So if someone has a discovery experience, what's the best way that I can measure and demonstrate that experience was impactful? For my summer research program, is it the number of students that go on to graduate school? Is it, just that they did it? Is it something else? I don't know. And so for me personally, that's been really hard, especially talking about this sustainability of the efforts that we're doing. So once our initial kind of seed for the program ran out, then I had to say, oh wow, how am I going to fund this? And so working with our, College of Engineering Development Office, I had to put together all of these profiles of past students, and it made me think about this question very deeply. I could go on, and maybe we can talk later for those that are interested, but to me one of the big challenges is about how do we measure impact of discovery experiences.
I guess for me, in the physics and astronomy community and physical science generally, one of the challenges has been to really change the way we teach our classes, in the sense that so many of the exercises, and I'm sure the audience has experience with this, the exercises, right, the problem sets and the homework and the exams are always just rather dry and abstract and not necessarily relating to the real world as we experience it from day to day. And so the challenge has been to try to fold in those real world applications where we can. I mean, the power, right, of the abstraction in physics is the abstraction, right? Is that it's super general. It can actually apply it to everything.
But when you're first starting out, it's a little hard to see that power, and so you want to sort of take it step by step, and the way to do that is to have, I think, applications and exercises that, oh, this actually relates to like how helicopters work, or ships, or trees, or things that you see in real life and that you can test, you know, with just from your direct experience. It's a very visceral kind of learning.
Yeah.
And you can actually fold that in to every course. So yeah, that's what I've been trying to do. with difficulty, I will say, because you know, everyone teaches differently, right? So I've created all these problems, and I've been sharing them with my colleagues. Some of them just say, sorry, I don't have the time, I gotta cover Griffiths. That's literally what people say. Like, they literally say, I'm sorry, I'm all done. Like, Griffiths, I gotta cover what's in Griffiths, which is a textbook at ENF. So I'm like, okay, well, you know, thanks for considering it.
I think there are two main tensions I'd like to talk about. One is the tension between doing public-facing work that makes the work more consequential, helps students understand why it matters, but the more public it is, the higher the pressure. So it's public-facing, high pressure, you know, only the classroom sees it, low pressure, safe space, comfortable. That's one kind of continuum. The other, I would say, is how much structure to create versus freedom, giving the students freedom to do anything. And I think on the second, I have never in any of our courses had students complain that we gave them too much structure or that what we gave them was too narrow. So, you know, if you have to write a haiku or a sonnet, that's very constrained. There's room for lots of creativity. And I would say in all of our projects, really providing the scaffolding and saying this is how long the thing has to be. These are steps 1, 2, and 3. Providing those structures, I think, really supports student creativity. As far as the public versus safe space question, there too, I think, helping students understand not going beyond what you actually know or can confirm, that rules of evidence are important, that you can't just throw something up on the internet where it'll be forever and taken as reality without really knowing what you're talking about, and just putting a footnote to a source is not enough. So I would say to the other point, more structure is better. And as far as public versus classroom only, just helping students understand how far they can go in sharing things publicly when they know or don't know it.
So the question was about challenges, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Tensions and challenges.
Tensions and challenges. Yeah, I'd like to pick up on something Eugene was talking about. So I actually did have a slide. I'll go up and show it later, but it's about our project and the basic principles of our project. But we, over the past 3 years, have worked with 40 different faculty in 22 different departments in these groups. They're all across departments. It's been such an incredible journey, and as I mentioned, there's been this sort of explosion of new ways to think of teaching these courses. I think Min-Soo Kim from our project is in the audience. She has created this phenomenal project, How to Teach a Heritage Language. We have several teachers. It's really this very exciting thing. For me, the tension is all of this work is happening, but it is still mapped on the traditional university organization of departments. Where does it go? Not every department supports this work. Funding decisions are made by other people. And so faculty can create this, and as I mentioned, we have this lateral space where all of this work is happening, but the funding decisions and they eventually rest in the hands of individual departments, and that's not a given that this work is supported. So that to me, I don't know what happens next. It's just interesting to me. We have this huge university initiative. We have a donor, a funder. We have these projects happening, but we live here at the university, you know, and then how does it then land?
Thank you. I know we'll want to return to figuring out how to address these challenges and tensions in our discussion. One last quick question for our panelists. Please offer one piece of advice to instructors who might be in the audience who are thinking about transforming their teaching and beginning a discovery initiative in their own classrooms. What piece of advice would you give them? Can I give this to you?
I'll say there's also a lot of staff and students in the audience, so
Oh, okay.
you can give general support for discovery advice.
Okay.
I would say if there's something you're not sure how to teach, there are other people on campus who know how to teach it. So if you want to teach in an iterative way, folks, for example, at the architecture school or at design know how to do that. If you need to learn how to do field work or manage projects, hire a GSI from archaeology. Shout out to people who know how to work in the field. Sometimes it's not easy to identify who knows how to do what, but different disciplines have different strengths. And that's one thing that we did in Global Urban Humanities and Future Histories Labs, was to get folks together who knew how to do different things. So there are lots of resources on campus, and people are usually pretty generous in explaining how to do things.
It's a tough one. I mean, there's a lot, but I think for me personally, the advice would be, you know, to do the thing that you're imagining, and people will come and want to be a part of it. So the first time I launched that summer research experience, I was, honestly, I didn't think very many people would apply. It was just Berkeley. I thought, oh, who wants to do summer research in design? And then we got 120 applications. You know, so I also 100% echo the getting out of your kind of box. So in setting up that program, it was really important to, you know, not just live in mechanical engineering, but get folks signed up from electrical engineering, computer science, the School of Information, and so, yeah, both of those two things for me. Try it. If you're imagining it, actually try it, and then have confidence. Berkeley's such an amazing place. It's also huge. So there's going to be demand and interest, and you can let it be organic and grow it.
This is probably going to sound very generic, but I'll just go back to, you know, my experiences in advising, which is if you're a student, you know, find allies, right? So, and talk to different cohorts. So it's just been so powerful for faculty to talk to staff and students on a regular basis. Right? Not just like the one-off conversation in the hallway or something, but to have, you know, a regular meeting and to check in and to find out, you know, what the student body is concerned about, or how to address their needs, but to have allies, and not just like with faculty talking to other faculty, but faculty talking to staff, and staff talking to students, and that three-way sort of triangulation really makes a big difference.
Super, thank you so much. And I think we now have a new tagline for discovery on campus, and that is imagine it and try it. So thank you, Kosa. So now, let us have comments and questions from the audience.
I'll take the mic to you since we're recording this. And the fact that we're recording is why I'm asking it. So my name's Kathleen Ryan. I'm from Plant and Microbial Biology. We have just had our self-study for our departmental 10-year review, right? And what has become very clear to us is that our department is going to be judged in the future by student credit hours per faculty member, okay? This is what the whole campus is saying. This is in direct tension with everything I've heard you all talk about. We have a strong commitment in my department to experiential learning and course-based discovery. But those classes, we're having a really hard time figuring out how to make them scale. And And we have many, many more students who want research experiences than we can provide for them. You know, the other 80% of the students. And so how do we square this? How do we get the university to pay attention? The university who's promoting discovery, at the same time they're saying, yeah, but we're not actually going to give you money to do it. It's really distressing to me, and I don't know if anyone has an answer, but I wanted that recorded as part of this, and I really think we need to organize and be talking to the campus structure about this, because we're in this room and we're all serious about this. And if they're serious about it, they need to make the resources available and not just have it be a 3-year grant that then runs out and your program is stranded. So, thank you.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. See if the panel has anything to say to that, but I'll make a plug to join the Learning Community Google group so we can stay in contact and figure out how to advocate.
I don't know, I mean, aren't the labs the place to do it? I mean, in astronomy and in physics, we have required labs, and I mentioned them, and we're folding in these experiential learning into those labs. So it's not that we're creating a new course, although we did do that, and we do suffer from this sort of scaling problem for the new courses, for sure. But for the existing courses, like the labs, you can fold in this, you know, these new ways of learning, right? And that's what we're trying to do. So, and these lab courses, right, they're part of the major requirements. They are not going away.
That's true.
So, and there is a funding stream, albeit, you know, rather modest, but these things exist already.
I want to, sorry to put Pat on the spot, but this makes sense because you're talking about integrating discovery into required courses as well.
Right, it's not exactly the same problem because our RNC courses are small.
Yeah,
Right.
we're being told to teach larger
Right.
courses in
Right.
addition to more
Right.
sections of courses.
The larger problem is the institutional departmental structure or requirements coming up against those to actually put this into practice. So,
I'll say, sorry, I meant to.
that's okay.
We'll say this is a topic for one of the breakout rooms afterwards, is structural change required for discovery. So anything, I'll hand this back, but also hand it back to Glynda.
And I'll hand it back to you.
Other
comments or questions?
Thanks, y'all. I've been dying to ask this for a long time, so I'm glad I have some, captive question answers. Particularly for those of you who have writing as part of the, the main evaluations associated with your courses. The world is changing, and I'm curious, what is the current reaction that you guys have in terms of curriculum and course policy to machine learning? And looking forward, is there a future that you can see where tools like ChatGPT are incorporated into your classes in a constructive way that empowers students and enables students who wouldn't otherwise to be able to engage with, creative research or creative writing? Thoughts?
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So Ben Spanbach is sitting in the back row here, and Ben has been part of our project for 3 years, and even before that, the Library of Congress project. And so the RNC courses, of course, are very writing-centric. And you can see our basic principles up there, but the hallmark of every teacher is different. So I'm wondering if we could hand the mic to Ben, because he really is developing this on campus and addressing this issue.
Wow. Okay, here we go. I guess first thing I'll do is plug the conference that we're having next week through the Berkeley Language Center. It's on Wednesday, most of the day. And if you get in touch with me during lunch or something, I can give you a little bit more information about it. But I do think it's a huge concern, and well, I'll just speak to what we're doing in my class and talk a little bit about that tension, because I do think it is.
Sorry.
Hello? Yeah? I do think it's a big tension that everyone across many different disciplines is going to have to face. I know that actually writing, I feel like we're actually safer than some of the other disciplines that deal with things like coding and other forms of expression. But I think that discovery has a huge role to play in the relationship that we have as a university to AI and generative AI, and I think that letting students have controlled exposure to generative AI in certain contexts, and what we're doing in our class is working with image generators and talking about image generators. I'm also very interested in translation, and I'm teaching a translation class as well this semester, so we're looking at the potential for AI and just the kind of the potential theory for a kind of, or the post-human theory for a generative AI. Excuse me, my throat. Well, yeah, I do. I think it's a big issue that we have to face, and I think that discovery does have a role to play in the sense that students want to use this technology. They're really excited about it, and without us giving them a space to do that and talk about it and have exposure to it in kind of controlled environments, it's going to happen on the margins, and it's going to be much more problematic for learning experiences than if it's happening in the classroom and in controlled ways and in ways that help them see the potential for this technology and some of the things that can happen moving forward. But obviously these are really fast-moving issues and big questions, so I'm excited to continue the conversation with people here. I was hoping that was one of the things we could talk about during some of the breakout rooms later today.
I'll just follow up and say I'm actually teaching a 100-person class called Beyond the Uncanny Valley, AI, Art, and Robotics, and we are doing these similar kinds of small interventions, making things. The students are using constraints and prompts that then they create things with generative AIs, generative models, and it's been really interesting and creative to see what happens there. So just to say, I think a lot of people are doing that.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, panel. Can you give a round of applause to this great panel? I always think you have to be pretty intrepid to open your classroom doors and let people come in, and that's what these folks have done today, and we're also grateful to learn from your expertise. I'm so happy that we've uncovered challenges along with the possibilities. Challenges like, well, assessment and funding and structure, providing enough of it, and on and on. But along with those challenges, as we saw from the first panel, we gotta do this, folks. Our students are showing us the potential of discovery on our campus, and we have to find a way to address these issues that we're gonna have to grapple with in terms of scale and so on. But I think we're up for it. And perhaps we'll learn some more in our small group discussions later on. So thank you very much.